So, the next topic we wanted to talk about is a really controversial one. We talk often on this show, and really our mission on the show is to democratize Silicon Valley thinking and mindset and principles globally. And I would say there is a tension between the idea of, do you need to move to Silicon Valley in order to maximize your potential for success and to take advantage of this mindset? Or can you do it from where you're based? And I think probably between us, Yaniv, I'm a little bit more bullish or maybe even a little bit more dogmatic on the idea that if you want to build a blockbuster company, chances are, especially if it's a platform company, a tech company, chances are you want to move to Silicon Valley. It is one of the major predictors and accelerators and improvers of the probabilities of your success. Maybe just to speak for you a little bit, I think you agree that it might improve your chances or it might be a beneficial thing, but it's not mandatory. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it can. I think Silicon Valley is a real thing, right? It is. I've said it before. Silicon Valley is a place. It's not just a state of mind. I think you can have the state of mind, and it is somewhat portable. But if you leave Silicon Valley, the place, you have still lost something really meaningful that can help accelerate your startup.
Yeah. And so for my money, startups are all about probabilities and maximizing your probabilities. And I really think Silicon Valley is one of those massive maximizers of probabilities. But, these are all anecdotal. These are feelings. These are senses we've talked about on the show many times. And sometimes, there's an opportunity to quantify this. And Gary Tan over at YC, he runs YC. He's a very successful podcaster in his own right and been a successful founder in his own right. He tweeted recently, the odds of being a unicorn at YC, Y Combinator, if you don't know, and I don't know why you don't, it's the number one accelerator in the world, really sort of defined what that model is. He says that the odds of becoming a unicorn at YC are literally twice as high if you're a YC company and you decide to stay in the Bay Area. So it jumps from 5% to 10% chance that you'll become a unicorn. That's YC, that companies that happen to be in YC. But if you look at just your choice of location, Gabriel Jorison here, who is VC at Lobster Capital on LinkedIn, followed up this tweet and said, there have been two venture-backed outcomes greater than 10 billion in New York since the 90s, Datadog and MongoDB. But during that time, there have been $3 trillion, greater than $1 trillion outcomes in the Bay Area, NVIDIA, Google, and Meta, and an uncountable number of $10 billion plus outcomes. And so what he's saying is even being in New York is a significant headwind to having a massive outcome with your venture-backed startup. And then Gary, his original point was being in YC, which is kind of even a more concentrated part of Silicon Valley, doubles your chances again. And the point here being, the point they're making, they've called out, is who you surround yourself by and where you are has a massive impact on your chances for success. Success here being defined as, billion-dollar and trillion-dollar outcomes.
I would say that is indeed success.
That is indeed. Well, I mean, I add that caveat because, Yaniv, you and I in the comments section of our LinkedIn posts will often have very proud people who are not from or in Silicon Valley, never experienced it, declaring that Silicon Valley's definitions of success are not the only definitions of success, and that somehow lifestyle and safety and political stability and family and all these other things are just as important to the success of one's life. And those things are true. It just depends on what you're prioritizing for. And I would argue this show and Silicon Valley are really about prioritizing for the exit and the value creation at scale.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And look, it's hard to argue with the data. I mean, especially in terms of those massive outlier outcomes, right? They tend to happen in Silicon Valley. The only point I would make, or the only little extra bit of context I'd give there, is that some of those outcomes actually were companies that were founded outside of Silicon Valley and then moved there, including, interestingly, Y Combinator itself, which actually started off in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so did Meta, right? Facebook came out of Harvard and was encouraged by his investors, Mark Zuckerberg, to move to Silicon Valley. So I think, there's always that little bit of correlation causation thing, which is once you reach a certain scale, you kind of need to move to Silicon Valley, or there are various forces that push you there. But that is because it's an unparalleled place to grow your startup. And, I have said, and, as someone who's never lived full-time in Silicon Valley, choosing not to live there if you want to build the best career, the best startup in tech, it is a lifestyle choice. And as you say, Chris, it's a lifestyle choice that I've made. It's a lifestyle choice you've made a lot of the time. I know you're living there at the moment. It is completely valid to make those choices. You can also build incredible startups anywhere in the world. It's just a bit harder. And, one thing we're trying to do with this podcast is make it slightly less harder, if you see what I mean. But it will still be harder. And I don't really see much point with arguing against that.
Yeah, I would say that the best argument against the Silicon Valley success theory is that founders can walk away with a life-changing amount of money with a bootstrapped or subscale exit. You know, if you exit for 10, 20, 30, 50, $100 million from a company you mostly own or partly own outside of Silicon Valley and you don't become a unicorn or a $1 trillion company, that's still a life-changing amount of money for you personally, potentially. The question you have to ask yourself is your goal a life-changing amount of money, or is it changing the lives of others? Is it about building a legacy, making a dent in the universe, about collecting what some people call fuck off money, money that allows you to move from being comfortable to being a capital allocator? And I think this is a question that only you as an individual can answer for yourself. Again, for large parts of my life, my focus has actually not been on money. It's been on making a dent in the universe and building something that outlives me and scaling and improving the world. And so that's a very different goal.